Hey, what's up, viewer? Welcome back to this Nebulous live development creation series. I do believe this is day 17, hour 1, and this is the first video that I have gotten to work on since I announced I was going to attempt putting ECS into the game. After working with ECS for a few days, I decided that going with just ECS takes away some of the strengths of object-oriented programming, and Unity is built to leverage both. So I've decided to take a different approach and use ECS later on down the line if necessary. I don't actually think it's a good idea right now I don't think it's a good idea to actually build a pure ECS system right now. At least not with how familiar I am with it. If I was more familiar with it, perhaps it would be a little better, but I feel like I'm kind of on a crunch right now, so it feels right to go back to doing it like this. So without further ado, I am going to get started here. I do believe at the end of the last video I was setting up the camera to be panable by the player. And I believe there was a value. If I do that, I can move the camera around. Alright, so the idea is to have zooming in without panning at the same time, which it didn't really look like it was doing that much. The pan adjuster is not correctly set here. If I zoom back out, it actually, whenever I zoom in, it looks like it is messing with the pan adjuster anyway. So I'm going to close this up here and try and determine where this is happening. So I do in fact have a zoom speed on here. However, I was considering, instead of having an open zoom, having a zoom ranges more than anything. And it is working, but I said the micro value is not correct. So let me set it to 1250 and see how it zooms like that. Geez, it needs like huge values. But more or less, like, there's a zooming system. The speed's a little off, but it can functionally zoom, and then the panner has to have its own value, which is like 1,000. Usually works pretty good. And effectively, there's panning and zooming. However, when I go into this, if I do zooming from this stage, it's way too much. So I've got to rework how that works. Alright, so I'm not going to do that. Instead, I'm going to come up here and I'm just going to grab the player data. And we'll grab it from here. And then this is just player data dot action map names. Or at least it should be. the equal sign. And I don't need action map names on this. Okay. And then from here we're going to look at a float. See, this isn't as straightforward as this though. Oops, okay. So I'm going to have to create more or less pan adjusters. And it's the same thing. Zoom adjusters, basically. And these can be set with, more or less they can be set with, I think I was already doing that in here. So it's pretty similar for a zoom camera then. And I guess I don't have to calculate the zoom speed, so it is more or less simply going to be PlayerData dot current camera zoom adjuster. And then from here, essentially, I simply have to set up the values. So looking at, this was 1,000 or whatever. Maybe something like that. Maybe it might need to adjust later, but we'll see. Same thing, we need three tiers here. And it was out up to like 100,000. $100,000, 10,000, 1,000. And we'll go something like this. And we will have to do the same thing here. PlayerData dot current camera zoom adjuster equals PlayerData dot zoom adjusters at the integer of PlayerData dot current galactic current. I think it was called current galaxy tier. Oh, no. I'm simply starting at the galaxy tier. And this will default it to the galaxy tier, but then the next steps after that are anytime the camera is, well, I guess first things first, let's just test. Oh, well, it's not going to shift them. Okay, so I basically know it's going to default them. Alright, so let's see, where do I actually have that set up? Click selection, the input system, Okay, so it's actually on the galaxy. Interselected nebula from the galaxy view. So we're gonna come in here and okay, so this is already changing that. Okay, so I have to. I think that's it. So I can do the same thing then in the active nebulas, exit nebula. And it is practically the same line of code if I'm not mistaken. And I think, did this one work a little differently? I can't remember. No, I guess not. It still changes values. And that's only once the iteration is complete, so they won't be able to mess around with the camera too much as they're transitioning, basically. And it's going to move them to the same spot, irregardless if I'm not mistaken. So this should allow us to transition into a nebula. Or first it should let us pan around decently, which it does. And it should let us zoom in and out decently, which it does. And I might need to add a zoom in out cap or something. And then if I'm going into a new nebula, I still have panning capacity. Look at that. And that's essentially the idea, is that the player can pan the camera around to, like, man, it's so cool. It's got subtle flares. It's so sweet. And they're even blending. That's pretty cool. Yeah, so the idea is the player can just pan around inside of their nebula. That's the idea. And if they like reach the edge of the nebula, then the camera would just like not move any further, basically. Is the idea. Which is why the camera needs to be pointed straight down and not angled, because it looks weird whenever they are panning around a camera that's not pointing straight down properly. And I think I can fix that. Oh, and then let's double check how the zoom looks. So it's the same thing, like, it's much better. It's not overkill. And there's probably going to need to be a zoom out maximum. Because essentially the player would be able to, like, feasibly zoom in here pretty far. Ah, see, that's pretty sweet. It transitioned as it zoomed into better emission, but the idea is that, I mean, essentially the idea is, like, to zoom into, like, right here and then have the planet here, more or less. And the player can pan around to a certain degree within that star view. So it's actually pretty dang close. So besides for like a maximum zoom thing, the other thing was like, maybe if I reach max zoom and zoom out again, it transitions out the camera. That'd be pretty cool. See, this is bad. I don't want to get all the way out here where I'm technically in the galactic tier. I guess that's not a deal breaker right now, though. So here we are, back in here, whatever, and then I'm just going to zoom back out. Alright, so once again, we're looking at an inter-nebula option, which is okay, and the final camera rotation is in fact down. Oh, is that, and that's what this is? Okay, so I'm a little confused in this because why would this have to be... why did I have this custom nebula rotation degree? Okay, so I'm a little confused here because I feel like this should just be quaternion dot down or something. Alright, well basically so I'm actually not sure here because I'm just trying to get the... what is the quaternion for basically this? I'm trying to say... oh, I just learned this in vector 3 dot down. Okay, awesome. This is actually where I want the camera to be rotating towards. I'm not sure why I had this thing going on here. Let me see here how this looks. This will set the pan up so it will actually be on a horizontal plane properly. Alright, so it's fine like this. But if I zoom into this, it needs to... okay, so that's... obviously not correct. It's like pointing towards Z or something. It's a little strange. So let me see here. So what if I go like this then? Maybe this will set it up properly. Okay, so let's see, there was a very specific one. Quaternion look rotation. There we go. So it's a little less stylized. It was actually kind of cool how the camera like bled in sideways. That was kind of cool. But this is essentially how it's supposed to work. You come down into a nebula like this or something. And I'm still not sure if that's everything I want. I might have to set it up where the player can like, I'm not sure. What else it's going to need. But that does fix that for now. So the panner is not perfect, the zoomer isn't perfect. I guess now what needs to happen is the player needs to be able to select a star. So they zoom on in here. They need to be able to like click this star. Man, I have to admit, it just feels like it feels super 2D like that. So I'm wondering, like, if I'm inside of a nebula, like, it would be cool if I don't know, I guess let's see what happens. It would be cool for the player to be able to go like this, or go like this, where they can rotate around this star. So if they have the star selected and they're focused on that star, they could. It would be cool for them to be able to like go like this, I suppose, because it feels more 3D like that. If it's from the top down purely, it kind of feels 2D. So there's some aesthetic work that needs to be done there for sure. All right, so the player needs to be able to more or less hover and select stars. And at the moment, if I'm in here, there's no hover option and there's nothing happens on click. But if I click player data, there is in fact a blue supergiant selected. So there are selections like this. Current nebula selection. Sorry, I'm just double checking on this data here. Nebula clone. Okay, it's not selecting. Okay, whatever. Alright, so for this, the galaxies, nebulas, stars have to more or less be given a component that changes them on hover and changes them on click. They're already in the active selection system. And I know I've already got a script for that. Change color on hover, which was a nebula script. And it doesn't even have to know which material it is. Okay, so now all the stars have this. However, now each of these shaders needs a new variable. So this now needs a float, and I can call it a boolean. It is hovered. And if it is hovered, it has to do something. And the same token is active selection is another boolean. It also has to change some stuff anytime the selection is made. So this is, I mean, this is severely similar to the version that's happening in the Nebula. So I'm going to have to admit here that I am not doing my absolute best at reusing similar functionality. But actually, this is the effect I was going for anyway, kind of. Okay, so I'm gonna see, let's see if I can do this. More or less, I'm just gonna copy all of this and paste it in here. And it's going to be more or less the same concept, and these are matching. Sweet. And this is going to cover the base color and the emission, which the emission is more important overall for the star. Just double checking what the intensity is at. And from here it will in fact just change its color. But I don't want it to just change its color, I want it to do a Fresnel effect. And if I do this color, we can say active selection color. And we can also say hovered color. And from here I don't have to actually change this or this. And we might as well flip these around since this is active selection. So if it's active selection, change it to that color. If it's hovered, so you have to call it base color. And I do in fact need a base color here for in the event is active selection is false. Let me double check that's correct here. Okay, so base color goes into false and true only goes into the specific ones. So base color false, false, true, true, okay. It's all set up the same. So now I can actually set these colors from the inspector, is the idea. Alright, so trying to consider where to actually initialize these values. So red supergiant now has exposed properties, but they can only be accessed at runtime, so I basically have to I'm going to need a star data mono behavior. I'm sorry, I'm debating this. So I do a public, I don't even know if I can do an HDR color. So I do a public color here, but I'm kind of getting the idea to do it in player data. And instead come in here and make a public color array for star colors. And I'm just assuming, or I'm assuming I'm not going to mess up the order of the stars. If I try to change this color, I in fact cannot change its intensity anyway. So the shader graph will have to do that. So some kind of script somewhere is going to have to apply the base color values. I kind of feel like that's on instantiation, to be honest. Alright, so essentially when this spawn is spawned, I guess this is instantiated Nebula. And the Nebula itself actually has the basically I have to come in here and say new star dot get component mesh renderer dot material, and then I'd say like dot set color. Which means it then has to gather a player data value so hold on a second here. So basically what I could do is say new star dot get component mesh renderer material set color, and the property is base color. Can I set emission or something, or what? It's a little strange because the color, it's not letting me put in a float 4 value to give it emission. Let me see if I can do say new color. And get an alpha value. Oh, you know what I can do? I think I'm pretty sure I can just increase the number. In fact. So the idea would be to say like player data dot star colors at random star choice. Basically. And from this, I can change all 8 of the star colors from this exact same spot, which is from the editor. Another thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a component Which I think I already did that, didn't I? And more or less put the public array in here. And then from here, yank this out of here. And then grab the star data and drag it onto player data. And then I can bump this up to 10. Ah, it's not gonna let me. Well, that ruins that whole plan, so. Yeah, that really sucks because I don't know how to do that exactly. Alright, so I'm gonna send the Google here. Okay, so Unity 3D. Assign HDR color from script. Okay, so this says use set vector. This other one says to use an attribute. So let's try the attribute first. However, I can't say. I don't know if I can use this on an array. Fix this error and then double checking the inspector whether or not the array is accessible. Alright, sweet, it is HDR. And we can add multiple elements, so as long as I remember, this is how this works. Should be good. So if this is correct, I should be able to set base color. Let's see if this works or not. And I'm missing something, which I can fix by jumping up here and taking this down to one value. And that will force all stars to be super red supergiants. We'll see if they light up properly or not. And in fact, the finale effect's working. But the emission is not correct. And now they're much. I can just tell by looking at they're much more emissive. Way too much. But it's in the right. It's moving in the right direction though. Alright, so they definitely don't need to, and I'll have to make a whole other set of colors for that, but it should be fine. Okay, so let's bump it down to like 4 then. And their emissions are just a little off. It actually sticks properly if it's the active selection, so that's kind of working. I guess we're just missing like oh. So maybe I might be messing up the emission in general. Okay, so that looks better. So on hover, they need to finale effect, but just on their edge, basically. So what happens if I bypass the 1 minus node here? That doesn't look much different. I am trying to bypass this part, but trying to leave most of the original color. So maybe it's something like this. From base color to hover color, and from base color to active selection color. Alright, so now I guess the only thing left would be man, this is turning into such a heavy algorithm. Or, I guess I shouldn't call it that. Academics, I know there's academics who would frown upon me for daring to assume this is an actual algorithm. But it's just kind of a figure of speech. It's just what's kind of annoying about this, because like if I could just set the prefab's base material value, I wouldn't have to do this I wouldn't have to set it at instantiation. So like if I could just change these manually, but it won't let me. I'm not sure, and I'm not sure why that is technically. I'm not sure why. Here, hold on. Let me check something in here. Yeah, I don't know how to edit it from the other side. Ideally, I could come in here and change these, but I can't for some reason. So for now, I'm just going to stick with doing it like this. Alright, so I have to come into the star data component. So I'm going to come up here and just cache that. And I think I can write it like this. And then we'll come down here and replace this with this. And that essentially aliases the dig into the star data. So I think that'll help. So we're looking at base color. And these have to be spelled exactly correctly, so just let me double check here. Is it just hover or hovered color? Hovered color, active selection color. And we actually don't want to use the star data star colors. We in fact want to add something like this: public color, active selection color, and public color, hovered color. But we also want to add this attribute for both of them. Now star data can just say hovered color, and star data can now say active selection color, which allows us to variabilize those. So let's take a look. That should set these values at the proper times, and it gives me the ability to tweak these from the editor. So let's see, hovered color, just make it red also. For now, let's just see if it will do this properly. So if these are emitting at 6, this will be the last little experiment I do, because I just remember I forgot to set my timer on. And I'm looking at over at the recording timer, and it's almost at 1 hour, so I'm going to give this one shot here and then move on to the next video after that. Alright, so if I zoom into the nebula, and let's see, so hovering it still is actually not correct. And that might just be because I'm screwing up the Fresnel effect, but it's not, that is actually not correct, technically. So, alright, I'm going to have to come back to this in the next video and continue sorting out how to give the player visual feedback for their selection. Another thing that's going to be coming up at some point is the fact that some of these stars are going to be too small to be seen, and to deal with that, the player is going to have like a UI element on the screen that is basically in the same place as the star but isn't the physical star. That way they can still select stars that are there but too small to be seen. Which that's going to be a whole project in itself, but let's see what happens. So, alright, that's it for this video. I will see you in the next one, and take care.